listening to the best of the Martha Zoller Show. To hear the full show each day, tune in to AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN or log in to accesswdun.com and click the Listen Live button from 9 to 11, Monday through Friday. It is the Martha Zoller Show, and I'm here with my good friend Michael Levine, who does these fantastic Without Notes YouTube program that's been on for a while. And we're going to talk about all the news of the day, but I'm so excited about who he has coming up very soon in speaking to General Petraeus, who is like one of my real heroes, Michael. I mean, I think that he is a soldier, and I just love him.
Well, I was very honored to interview him. That interview will be out in about 2 weeks, and it was very fascinating, as he is. It mostly spoke about his beliefs, not as much with the military as with life. He said repeatedly, life is a competition sport. And that if you're going to prosper in life, A, you better get used to that concept, and 2, you got to get prepared for the competition, and you got to devote enormous amounts of energy and time and effort and thought into how to prosper in that competition. And I thought it was very good advice maybe that this nation doesn't necessarily want to hear, but very, very much needs to hear. So I think it'll be an interesting conversation. At least I hope so.
Well, I mean, because it really feeds into kind of what we're dealing with right now. And there's a lot of people out there that haven't learned the lessons of leadership, of independence, of resilience. And we're starting to elect people like that, whether it's,
correct,
Barack Obama, who barely had a job before he was elected to president, or Zoran Mandani, that it hasn't had a real job and now is going to be running one of the biggest cities. I mean, I've given up that maybe a miracle will happen, but it looks like he's going to be the mayor of New York, or, any of a number of other people John Ossoff, the senator of our own state, really did not have a real job before he was elected to the United States Senate. And we used to value experience and leadership and that kind of thing. And then you have the kind of ancillary path of people like Donald Trump being successful, who are those kind of hardworking leadership type people, and David Petraeus and others like that. So we've got these two tracks going on, but because of social media and a lot of other things, one side hardly ever hears from the other one.
Well, all well said, Martha. Very, very well said. Look, the Democratic Party has made an important realization, which is that free is a very, very appealing vote-gathering strategy. Unfortunately, the problem with that logic is that there is no free. And they are selling a total and complete, unadulterated con job, right? However, it is fascinating to watch a nation, or many, many portions of a nation, believe it and buy into it, which I guess has a lot to say about the education of our citizenry. I mean, my goodness gracious, 30, 40 years ago, your parents would have instructed most people over the age of 10, Johnny, Sally, Jose, there is no free. There is no free. You have to earn it. But today, we have been lulled, or many, many people, into this free, if it's free, it's for me, logic. Some of the stuff that I've heard in New York is so ludicrous. It is so outrageously stupid and silly, moronic, that you would think it was a Saturday Night Live parody.
Well, and I was listening. I was listening in on a meeting that I was invited to, and I was just listening because I knew it was mostly Democrats, and I wanted to hear what they had to say. And they were talking about the fact that, you know, we've got to give this Zoran Mamdani a chance because we've never really tried any of this stuff before. And I'm like, okay, you clearly don't understand history. And in fact, everywhere the socialism and communism has been tried, it has failed. And we can't, but we live in this world where a lot of young people, and Van Jones of all people said there are 1 billion young people that have been taught to hate America, to hate capitalism, to hate free markets, and that we're going to deal, and in 10 years they're going to be in power, and in 20 years they're going to be running things. And that, for me, because you know I'm an optimist, scared the heck out of me.
I think it should. I think the fact that we are actually considering the possibility of this socialist as mayor of New York City, should be so preposterous as to be a Saturday Night Live skit. But yet it is happening in our midst. Now, I think any thoughtful person should be invited to ask, well, if it's happening, why is it happening? Who educated the people screaming at his rallies, yelling and screaming with ecstasy, anti-Israeli, anti-capitalist, Marxist logic? Where did these people come from? Where were they educated? How did they get through the American education system? Isn't that concerning? Dear God Almighty.
It's so crazy. Now, then our good friend Gavin Newsom went on one of these urban radio or urban podcasts and affected this kind of voice that sounds like he grew up in the hood and tried to say that he was a latchkey kid that came home and ate Wonder Bread and was really not, you know, coming from the privilege that he came from. And it's so funny to me that a simple Google search just shows that this isn't true, but nobody pushes back on it.
Well, nobody in the mainstream media does, which is why the mainstream media has as much trust, has no trust, because there is no reasonable pushback. If a Republican said half of the nonsense that he said, right, just half, then every mainstream media outlet, now mainstream, ABC, CBS, NBC, CNN, MSNBC, National Public Radio, which could be the worst, by the way. If you want the trophy for the worst, perhaps National Public Radio is the worst. It's hard, a lot of competition. And Associated Press. Yeah, you thought, how could Associated Press become a biased outlet? It's happened. It's happened. The worst on Israel might well be the Associated Press. How did this happen? Well, we allowed it. We allowed it over year after year after year of just going along and thinking, well, it'll all work out. It didn't work out. So, unfortunately, Gavin Newsom can sell his con job. Forget about his record. I mean, just this narrative that it's preposterous. It's, as you said, a simple Google search from a bright 12-year-old can prove it's nonsense.
Absolutely. Michael Levine, if you guys don't know who Michael is after all these years of him being with me, he is one of the best branding and media experts the world has ever seen. He's represented a record-breaking 58 Academy Award winners and 34 Grammy Award winners, 43 New York Times bestsellers, and he wrote the fantastic book, Broken Windows, Broken Business. And he's got the fantastic podcast that, that is a deep discussion into issues that I think that we all ought to care about. So I am so excited to always have you on the program.
God bless you. Thank you for the chance.
Putting the talk in news talk. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
Brendan Buck, who I've known for years, and really looking forward to talking with him because he's kind of inside the vortex in a way, but is looking at it from the outside. So, Brendan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. It's so good to be back together with you.
So tell us a little bit about you and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think for most folks to know, well, one, I'm from Georgia, go Dogs.
Yes.
Martha and I first, I think, got to know each other when I was working for Tom Price back when he was a House member. But I went on to go on to work for John Boehner when he was Speaker of the House and Paul Ryan when he was Speaker of the House. And today I'm out of government. I do some communications in the private sector. I do some we'll call it punditry on NBC News. I've got a column with the New York Times. So I keep great interest in what's going on in Congress, but I work a little bit adjacent to it these days.
So you went through a couple of shutdowns, right?
I did.
Okay.
All of the recent ones. Yeah.
Yes, and me too. When I was working for Senator Perdue, we had one under the Obama administration. And it seems to me this sticking point is the issues around the Affordable Care Act, a.k.a. Obamacare. But also you've got a long history of Democrats saying and Republicans saying you shouldn't use policy issues as an argument to shut the government down. And I always give my listeners a little bit of history where, prior to Graham-Rudman, we had shutdowns all the time, but the idea was you were going to eventually fund the government, so they didn't actually, quote, shut the government down. They just they automatically kept funding at current levels. Then Graham-Rudman came along, and it was a good idea because it was going to hold people more accountable. But what he created was this political weapon, which is called the government shutdown. So that's kind of where we are today. What do you think about where we are today and kind of what needs to be done?
Well, this has gone on a lot longer than I expected it to. I'll tell you that much.
Me too.
I was there in 2013 working for John Boehner when we had the shutdown over Obamacare at the time. I can tell you that 16, 17 days was really intense. And I think what has been most striking to me is just how this has not been very intense. Senators are kind of coming in, they're voting a couple times throughout the week, and they're going home for weekends. I mean, we didn't leave Washington for that entire stretch. And maybe it's just people have realized that government shutdowns don't have the political impact that they thought they might, or doesn't have the economic impact that they thought it might, or maybe it's just, both sides think they have a strong position and they're just going to ride it out. But nobody seems to feel like they're losing enough. But I guess I would argue nobody is winning either. Whatever strategy both sides thought that they were implementing here is not really paying off. They keep sort of pointing at these upcoming pain points, whether it's SNAP benefits or paychecks running out, or the healthcare deadline that I know we'll talk about. Or whatever it may be, and they keep thinking like the other side is then going to want to fold at that point, and nobody seems to be folding. I think at this point they probably need to start working on weekends. I think they probably need to start having more votes on the floor where members can be talking to each other and figuring out what the sort of path ahead is, because a lot of times these things come together sort of organically. Enough senators say, okay, I'm sick of this. Let's figure out a path ahead, and that doesn't seem to be enough pressure, and certainly not enough time in Washington for them to feel like they need to do that.
So let's talk about the healthcare thing first, and then I've got a couple of comments that have come in from listeners that they're really annoyed about, and maybe we can shed some light on it. The first thing, so this. As I understand the background on this healthcare thing is there were subsidies that were given that were more related to COVID, and they had a time limit on them. And so this time limit is coming up. The president and the Republicans have said, yeah, we're willing to talk about this, but we want to keep the government open while we're doing it. Is that correct, or what would you add to that?
Sure. Yeah, there were some what we call enhanced subsidies that were put in place during the Biden era, and those are expiring this year. And Congress has just sort of woken up in the last few months to a realization that when those expire,
as usual, that's how they do it. Okay.
Yeah, and when those expire, premiums in that marketplace, which is a huge population in Georgia and a huge population nationwide, are going to go up, and not just a little, they are going to go up a lot. And so whatever your view of the ACA is at this point and whether or not that should be reformed, and I'm happy to talk about that. A lot of Republicans are talking about that. The reality is that for the million-plus folks in Georgia who are now going to have their premiums more than double, that doesn't really do a whole lot for them. That just means they're paying a lot more money until you figure that out. So Congress has kind of come to this realization. Democrats have used this as the sort of primary thing they're talking about for the shutdown, but it's not just Democrats. You've had, I'm sure as you are well aware, Marjorie Taylor Greene has been very outspoken about how Republicans were not very well prepared for this, don't have an answer for it, and there are a lot of Republicans, conservative Republicans, people like Tommy Tuberville and Josh Hawley, who have said we should probably extend this and figure out something down the road, because just having this cliff where people's premiums are going up hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month is probably not a very good idea, both substantively and also, let's be honest, politically going into an election year. Having healthcare costs skyrocket while you're in complete control of government is a liability. And I think that's something that they're talking about. I do want to say I am working on this issue in my sort of professional capacity, so know a lot about it. But I also, I've been through healthcare politics on the Republican side. It doesn't usually work out very well for us.
I think what concerns me as somebody, like I'm married to a primary care physician, and we run a little correctional nursing business. And what bothers me about the whole thing is that all these subsidies did was kind of paper over the fact that healthcare prices were going way up anyway. Okay, there's been nothing. More people are covered by the Affordable Care Act, but there has been nothing affordable about it. The cost has still gone up much more than every other sector of the economy. And you're right. We need to get to the table and actually work on this. And I think the core of this, and you were around when this happened, is ACA was the first bill of its size that had the kind of impact on the economy, America, whatever you want to call it, that was an all one party vote. Prior to that, all the really big stuff we did, we always got bipartisan votes. And I think at the crux, at the foundation of the problems we have in being able to talk about this is that.
I don't disagree with that at all. And look, I don't think anybody would dispute, there's a lot of broken in our healthcare system, and it's not necessarily just in the ACA market. I mean, health costs are up everywhere. I guess in the short term, I don't know that the answer is just cutting people off and making the premiums go up. I mean, that's ultimately what we're talking about. Now, I was also around, I was there for the 2013 government shutdown where we were trying to defund and repeal Obamacare. I was also there in 2017 working for Paul Ryan when we actually went through this exercise, repeal and replace. And that was a bit of a disaster, I'll be honest, because we have, as Republicans, a lot of strong views on repeal. We don't have a lot of strong views on replace. And that's where we got caught up, and we paid a pretty heavy political price for that. Donald Trump's popularity took a huge hit at that time, and it was really the issue that Democrats rode to take back the House in 2018. Now, Republicans all of a sudden are now talking about reviving a repeal and replace strategy. Whether or not that's wise, I don't know. But I sure know it's not going to happen in the next 2 months when these tax credits expire. And so, if you're going to give Donald Trump room and time and space to reform the healthcare system, great. That's cool, but you probably shouldn't create a huge political and cost liability for yourself in the meantime.
No, I don't disagree. And what I'm hoping for is, because we have enough votes to open up the government. We've had enough votes to open up the government since September 30th. We just haven't had enough votes to get through the filibuster vote, the cloture vote. So that's one of the questions that our listeners had, is really, what is cloture? And I explain it just about every day, but I thought maybe you would like to explain it today.
Well, certainly, getting basically anything done in the Senate requires 60 votes, and that used to be a thing that the minority in the party or the minority in the Senate would use judiciously. When there were, decades ago, it was things would pass with a simple majority all the time, even though the minority had the chance to filibuster or something, and they didn't. But in the
they would vote to let the vote go forward, which is what cloture is, even though they were going to ultimately vote no.
That's right. Because you have to get that 60-vote hurdle to get to the final vote. And then the final vote can just be a simple majority. But in the Harry Reid era, he really clamped down on this. And basically, at any time that Republicans were trying to do something, he would filibuster. And it is now common practice now that nothing passes the Senate without 60 votes. And that's what's going on here. I mean, and yes, there are the votes. I would caution, though. I'm a House guy. I'm not a Senate guy. But I think the filibuster has served us very well in terms of stopping the growth of government and when Democrats are in charge from just doing anything and everything they want to do. And I think that's John Thune.
Oh, no, I want to keep it in place. I mean, I want to keep it in place. I don't think it should go away. I think that we've got to eventually, I think the answer is not with Chuck Schumer, though. I think it's with negotiating with these senators that are in states that Trump won a year ago and try to get them back, get them to the table somehow and maybe create a working group that's going to work on some of these issues from these more moderate states.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to come top down. I totally agree. I think there still remain a lot of senators who are frustrated. Like, being the job of a senator is not very fun right now because you just don't have any freedom to do anything. The committees aren't working. They're not coming up with their own working groups of bills and issues that they want to work on. The schedule is tight. We came in front of the government, this sort of short-term government funding bill aside, they don't have any plan on how we're going to fund the government long-term.
Right.
We may end up with what's called a continuing resolution again, where we're just still spending the same priorities that Joe Biden had a year and a half ago.
I think there's a pretty good chance they could come up with some kind of compromise that's going to get a budget all the way to the end of the next year so they can get everybody through the next election. That tends to be what they do sometimes. The other question I got was that people are really angry about, that if you pull up the schedule for the Senate, yesterday, I haven't pulled it up for today. They had all kinds of committee hearings yesterday. They had all kinds of other things they were doing. They did vote in a couple of appointments, for that. But they took one vote on the government shutdown and maybe spent 15 minutes talking about it. That really angered a lot of people.
Yeah, John Thune has argued like he doesn't see any value in having votes on Fridays, having votes on weekends, doing anything real different. And I guess I would argue, as much as I love John Thune, I haven't seen a lot of evidence.
Every day they need to be doing it.
Yeah. I haven't seen a lot of evidence that what they're doing right now is working either.
Well, especially since they're still drawing their salary. You heard Bernie Sanders last week when he was asked by whoever was replacing Joy Behar, and she said, well, don't you think you should do without your salary while the government shut down? He goes, well, there's young people that have kids and they need the money. And the woman who was filling in for Joy Behar, I'm sorry, I forgot her name, said, well, there's people going without their whole checks right now. So they do live in this world, this bubble of a world where everything goes on for them, even though other people are suffering.
Absolutely. And there are increasingly a lot of people for whom this is very problematic, but it has not been inconvenient enough, in my view, for the senators themselves.
Yes.
And I think you know this well. If you make this very inconvenient for them, if you make this stressful for them, they'll find a resolution. But when you fly in late on Monday night, you're in Washington for 2 days, and then by Wednesday you've announced that Thursday morning will be your last vote, and then you're home for another 3 or 4 days. Nobody's getting real stressed out. Nobody's made uncomfortable. Nobody's on the floor talking to their colleagues about what the path ahead is. They're going home. They're recharging. I think they probably would prefer to not be in the shutdown, but they're sure not acting like it. And so I think something needs to change, and I think it has to come through the Senate. I don't really have a problem with Mike Johnson keeping the House out because this is a Senate thing at the end of the day. But whatever you're doing isn't working. But I mean that for both sides. John Thune sort of just going through this isn't working. Chuck Schumer trying to get Donald Trump to bail him out isn't working. So we got to change something somewhere. And I think working weekends is a good place to start.
Absolutely. Brendan Buck, if people want to know more about your work, how can they do that?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter, or X, I guess they call it, just at Brendan Buck.
Great. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Appreciate it, Martha.
It's local radio, and that's why you're listening. It's the Martha Zoller Show on AM 550 and FM 102.9 WDUN.
We wanted to have Brian Morgenstern back on to talk about data centers and some of the concerns that people have about them so they understand a little more information about them. Brian, welcome back to the program. How are you?
I'm doing great, Martha. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so since we met last week, we, of course, in our own community, we had a big data center project that was tabled so that people could look at it a little bit more. And then over in Columbia County, which is a little bit like southeast of us, they're doing a similar thing. And what's being presented is that these data centers are going to come in. They're going to build out infrastructure at their expense. They're going to do some other things, employ some people. I think one of the criticism is doesn't employ as many people as people think they are for the amount of space they take up. And then, but the big thing is they could bring in enough revenue to actually reduce or eliminate your county taxes, your county property taxes, which is one of those things that a lot of people are talking about locally. But can you give us just a little primer on why data centers are important, and really what are the best questions people need to ask about them?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great setup. So data centers are important because the next generation of finance, of information, of how people search for information, answer questions, how businesses are going to progress, how people are going to learn, all of this depends on data centers and the energy that powers them. If we're going to win or if we're going to remain a superpower, we have to grow economically faster than China and our other opponents. The way we do that is we get more efficient with AI, really, and data centers, and we need this infrastructure in America if we are going to win the next sort of industrial revolution. So it's huge. It's a hugely important national priority. And then at the state and local level, as you said, this particular facility could end up really paying for people's county taxes. There are other data centers in locations where they're paying for all the emergency services in that location, police, fire, et cetera. There are others, I know, where they are the single largest taxpayers in the school districts, where they're really funding the local schools. So these things can bring in massive amounts of revenue and economic growth at the local level while also helping to achieve a national priority for the United States. Now, to the second part of your question of, what should people be looking at with these things, there's typically a few issues that need to be addressed, and it's where's the electricity going to come from? How is that going to affect people's power bills, if at all? Now, a lot of times, like you said, these companies will fund the infrastructure build-outs themselves. There can still be some debate over how the power bills are going to be affected in that region, and that's something that they need to work out because the data centers need to be good neighbors. They can't be, negatively affecting the neighbors, and so that's an issue that is typically worked out in the process. Another is water. Now, a lot of data centers, they'll need water to cool the machines. Computers get very hot, something, maybe people don't think about. So you need some infrastructure to cool the machines so that they don't overheat and break, and then that can be very expensive. But there's really good technology now, these closed-loop systems where you can either have a dielectric fluid like a mineral oil, or you can have a water recycling system so that you just fill it up once and then you top it off periodically for evaporation, but you're really just recycling water. So you're not drawing much water from the community. So that's a way that they address that. There's also typical business concerns with neighbors like noise or lighting or, things that can kind of interfere with people's typical quality of life. Those are, typically get worked out pretty well, actually. And they can take steps to limit noise or lighting problems or things like that. So that's oftentimes how these things go, and these concerns from the community usually get worked out during the approval process so that the data center is going to be good for the community, it's going to be good for business, it's really going to be good for everyone, and it's going to help America achieve its economic growth goals.
Yeah, so I get the concerns that people have, especially in a community like ours where you've got a lot of people that have retired here that, that have put their life savings into their home, into this community. And so I'm glad you addressed the water part of it because we're near Lake Lanier, as you may know, and a lot of people are concerned about that. So I actually think the county commission did a good thing in tabling it so that more information can get out, because one of the biggest challenges in local government is that people don't really come to the meetings until they're mad about something, and then they don't actually voice their opinion until after you've already taken the vote. So I'm very happy in this situation that they're being proactive and they're getting as much information out as possible.
Yeah, that's a good thing. And, I'm very familiar with the area. My wife is actually from where you're broadcasting from.
Oh, great.
And so it's spent a lot of time down there, and it's a lovely place. And what I've experienced in some of our projects is you really do need to go into the community, and, the data center developers should, if they can, offer tours. They should give detailed presentations about what they're doing, and sometimes, even more importantly, what they're not doing, to really dispel people's concerns and explain the benefits that they're going to bring to the community. And I think I mentioned on your show last week, to the extent possible, these developers should buy local, they should hire local, they should make sure that the prosperity that they hope to experience is shared with the people who live there. So it should be an open and honest process, and they should get buy-in from the residents. I think that is healthy. They should do it that way, and it leads to everyone, being happier. There will always be some NIMBYs who just want to say no matter what. But you have to get a sort of a critical mass of residents to be comfortable with it in order for it to be a successful business project.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think there's a challenge always, we're seeing it in our traffic right now because, there's things that need to be done road-wise that the growth has kind of gotten ahead of the road building, which is not an unusual thing. And it's made it a bit of a challenge. Now, I want to just put your other hat on since we're still in the day 28 or 29 or whatever of this government shutdown. And we've got this situation where the markets are going crazy. They love what's happening with business right now. They love what President Trump is doing on these trips around the world and how he's being received by countries. The interesting thing is that tariffs have not impacted us the way we expected them to. They haven't been as negative as a lot of people expected them to be. They have turned out to be a pretty good tool to be able to get certain reactions from people and have not had a huge impact on inflation. So we're hearing this where we have all these indicators that are fantastic about the economy. Gas prices are down. Grocery prices are down. Beef prices aren't, but there's improvement in a lot of areas. But yet we've got this government shutdown going on. So just your thoughts about kind of where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, ordinary Americans haven't felt it that much yet, but we're getting to a point where, a couple of programs like SNAP, the food assistance program, healthcare premiums are coming into focus. There are a lot of government workers who, of course, are feeling the pinch because they're not getting their paycheck. So we're nearing, various inflection points that could hopefully force somebody's hand. Of course, the answer from the administration and from the Republicans in Congress is, well, we have a solution to this. The Democrats should just vote to open the government. Just keep the same position they had. What was it, 7 months ago, something like that?
Right.
And so if they would just do that, then we would avoid this manufactured crisis because the Republicans are not going to vote for what the Democrats are asking for of $1.5 trillion, including health care for illegal immigrants. Not going to happen. So they should, maintain the position that they had recently and let's reopen the government and then continue to go to negotiate on these other issues. I think that's an okay place to be. The issue is that both sides think they're winning or at least not losing, and so it's one of these inflection points that hopefully will shake the trees to get to some agreement. But the Trump administration has done what they can to make sure people don't really feel the pain. When the Democrats were in power and there were shutdowns, they really wanted the American people to feel the pain as much as possible so that they can put more pressure on Republicans. The Trump administration is, I think, being kinder to the American people.
I think they are too. They're trying to, spread the pain around. Let's just put it that way. And it annoys a lot of my listeners and me that as I look up what the Senate schedule is for today. I haven't looked up today, but yesterday's schedule, they were having committee hearings. They voted on a couple of appointments. It was like it was business as usual, to your point about, it should be all they work on. And I personally think, I know John Thune's mindset is they're going to work regular schedule. I think they ought to force them to be in no matter what. And I don't think they should get paid. Bernie Sanders got called out on The View of all places, where he was said, why are you still getting your check? And he goes, well, there's some young members that have children and they need the money. And the woman who was filling in for Joy Behar or for Whoopi, I forget which one, says, well, there's people that are already doing without their checks. He goes, well, that's a fair point. So, and you also have had 2 unions that have come out and said, hey, it's time to end this. So hopefully they'll get to the table, maybe when the president gets back, because the dirty little secret is President Trump will negotiate. You know what I mean? One of the things my Republican friends are worried about is that if he gets around the table with Democrats and Republicans, that he will give a little because he's a negotiator. And, I'm not worried about that because I think that's what we need to do. But that's in the play, too.
Well, I think the Republicans in Congress, at least, their position is no.
We already voted. Yeah, we already voted.
Yeah, and this is basically the Biden budget. So Democrats are getting a lot out of it anyway.
Yes.
So we shouldn't give any more. And it's tough because that's a pretty reasonable position too.
It is absolutely. I think that when Trump gets back from this trip, President Trump gets back from this trip, I think you're going to see him do some negotiating. And we may not see it, outside. It might be behind the scenes, but I think we got to get this done here in the next week or so because I have a son that works for USDA. He's enjoyed the fact he's had a lot more time with his kids, but it's getting to the point where it may be a problem.
Yeah, well, and there are a lot of people in that situation. To your point, perhaps if Senator Thune just keeps them all in session until they pass something, these senators, you can hear or you can smell the jet fuel on the runway at Reagan Airport, when they're trying to get out of town. So if you just lock them in there, who knows? Maybe they see the light.
I worked for a U.S. Senator. I worked for David Perdue in his first term, and that's where I learned that senators and congressmen can actually book themselves on multiple flights on the day they're supposed to get out of town. The rest of us can't do that, because, and especially to Atlanta, there's a flight every hour. So sometimes he would be booked on 3 or 4 flights as you were waiting to get out of town. But you're right. You're absolutely right about that. But thank you so much for being with us today because the important information on data centers, we need it, Brian. Thank you so much.
You bet. Happy to do it.
To hear the full versions of last week's Martha Zoller shows, go to the podcast page at accesswdun.com, and you can follow me on social media at Martha Zoller.